welcome to B4's Business Brunch. My name's Jo Faulkner-Harvey. I'm from homeless Oxfordshire, and today I'm joined by Paul Morgan, who will introduce himself a bit more in a moment. And also I'd like to introduce you to Baroness Judith Jolly.
Good morning.
Morning, Judith. Morning, everybody. Today's topic that we're going to discuss, and Judith is going to start us off, is who are the policymakers? A bit of an insight into the House of Lords, maybe a little bit of gossip, who knows? And then we're going to sort of talk about why policy is important, not specific to our own industry necessarily, but how it affects our daily lives. And things like that. So I thought I'd hand straight over to Judith, if you don't mind. And if you would like to give us a bit of an idea about policy making and how it is different from the House of Commons, the House of Lords, what it's like being a woman sitting in the Lords as well, and how you're functioning in this very, very strange time of virtual life that we're all living. So Judith, if you'd like to take it away.
That's fine. Okay. I think on the woman bit, it doesn't really matter in the House of Lords. It's a pretty egalitarian place. I know that sounds strange because I can remember I sit on a select committee, which is to do with the environment, and everybody has to declare their interests at the beginning. And, somebody was saying, I have a farm on the Scottish borders, 15,000 acres. And, I thought of my 1/4 of an acre at the back of my house. And, but there is an enormous amount of, there are still people who inherit their title. There was one female inherited title, which was a slightly odd Scottish title, but she's now resigned and hasn't been replaced by anybody, which is a shame because A, she was very good, and B, it would be nice to have an inherited Scottish woman again, but there you go. And one of the things that the House of Lords does really, really well is policy. And we don't make policy, but we scrutinise policy that governments have made. So in the time that I have been there, and I arrived just over 10 years ago, I was introduced, which is a technical term, when you dress up in the red dressing gowns with the fur. But I was introduced at the beginning of January 2011, and it was in the halcyon days of the time that we were working with the Conservative Party, the coalition, and the big bill that was about to go through was a bill all about health and social care, which hadn't been changed for years and years and years. So there was a lot of work that needed doing. I had been a non-exec director on a couple of NHS trusts, and I'd chaired a primary care trust. So I knew how the NHS was plumbed. When you sit in front of a doctor, you'd have no idea how the wires work. No. But I understood that. So naively, the chief whip at the time said to me, well, you'll be doing the health bill. So I said, yeah, okay, that's fine, but I'd never done legislation. So you suddenly faced, I don't think I've got a bill here actually, but you're suddenly faced with something about the thickness of a telephone directory, because there was a lot of work there in sort of pale green paper, and you have to work your way through it and try and understand how that relates to what you know about. I was given a tame intern lawyer who, because he had a law degree, was meant to understand legislation, and he and I sat down before this bill started and went through it page by page to try and understand A, what it meant, B, what the implications would be, C, I was looking at it from a party political perspective. Did it actually fit in with the way I wanted the world to be? And we'll talk about what you do if it doesn't. And there are several stages. The first stage is technical, which is what's called a first reading, which is when somebody stands up, and it can be in either the Commons or the Lords, and introduces the bill. But that's all it does. They just introduce the bill And the next stage is second reading, where we all have the bill, we work through it, we work out what are the key issues, and we give speeches. So we say, you know, on balance, this is quite a good bill. Items A, B, and C, really get to the bottom of it. D, E, and F, there's a lot of work to do. So you have that sort of debate, which would probably last no more than 10 minutes for each person. So you need to get your head around that. Then the next stage is where you actually get into the weeds, which is what is known as the committee stage. And we don't sit around as a committee. In the House of Lords, the committee is the whole House. So if you can have a mental picture of the House of Lords chamber, you could have in a committee stage as many as 2 or 3 people discussing it. And we're not talking about COVID times. I'll talk about that in a minute. 2 or 3 people discussing it, or if something's really hot and there's likely to be a vote, everyone will pile in because they want to hear what the issues are and what the arguments are. So it can be full, and when it's full, you have not quite hanging from the chandeliers, but you have people sitting in the gangways. Instead of 6 on a bench, you sort of squash up to 7, and so it has a real atmosphere. And when you get some of the big beasts speaking, I'm a technical sort of person, I'm not a big beast sort of person, but when you get some of the big beasts, people really do pile in. So I was there when Heseltine was an active member, and he was always worth listening to. Shami Chakrabarti is always worth listening to. So, you know, there are people coming up that whatever your politics, they're actually worth hearing.
Judith, can I ask?
Yeah.
What's the transition like from being a commoner, as it were, to actually finding your way around the House of Lords and understanding the real sense of the corridors of power?
Well, you're given a mentor. And the mentor I was given was a really old friend, and in a way that wasn't a good idea, because we used to arrange to meet once a week, which ended up sitting in sort of one of the cafes and just gossiping, really. But the best advice I was given was by a woman who's a crossbench peer and has become a really dear friend, and she came up to me, because you have to give a maiden speech. So I was introduced on the Tuesday and my maiden speech was on the Thursday. I just wanted to get that away. And it was about health. It was about Macmillan, all of those sorts of things. And it was to try and give the members of the House an understanding of where I came from, what I was interested in. And you know, people come up to you afterwards and sort of say, "Oh, you know, I didn't know." Blah, blah, blah. So it is quite a big deal, your maiden speech. And my father had died in the end of November before I was introduced in the January. So I'd got really current experience of what it was like to be a carer or a relative of someone in a really big acute hospital. So I spoke about that. And there's for your maiden speech, nobody is allowed to interrupt. And you suddenly realize that all the security people stop all of the doors in, so that nobody is allowed in while you're speaking. There's no movement. You are, and then everybody has to be polite to you in the speeches that follow. And that doesn't go on forever. And that first health bill was a really political bill. And it was really hard to cut your teeth on it, but it really held me in good stead, because I met all the people interested in health right across the House very quickly. And you would have meetings which were Lib Dem only meetings. You would have meetings where it were only health people. So I got to know all the front benchers, because I was a front bencher as well. All the front benchers who were Labour, Conservative, and crossbench. And crossbenchers are really important. And I hadn't appreciated that. if you want to be a member of the House of Lords, you just sign on to the Parliament website, put in House of Lords Commission, and you can download an application form.
Oh, I might do that.
Yeah. And loads of people do.
Wow.
And the crossbenchers are completely apolitical, but they try to have people from all walks of life. Now, it must be said that I'm fairly sure that quite a lot of crossbenchers must be tipped the wink and being told that it would be, you know, they would be a benefit to the House. And I've done it to people. I've done it to really, really key women in industry. I've said to them, we need more people like you, not political, but with world expertise and life expertise to sit. And a couple of them got in and a couple of them hadn't. But, you know, that's just the luck of the draw. So you have that first stage where everybody has this set piece. Then we have the committee stage where we really, really dig into the weeds and you make amendments. So you say, you know, I don't like clause 17. Clause 17 would be far better if we put this bit in it to strengthen it. And that amendment would be debated. Every amendment is debated. And so if it's accepted at the next stage, then the bill is amended with that little bit that is your bit in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And once you have gone through the committee stage, you go through the report stage, and then it goes down to the House of Commons, who go through exactly the same process, sort of first reading, second reading, committee stage, and so on. And then the Commons looks at what we amend and say, yeah, that amendment's all right, but we don't like this one. And there then is a situation where there's a sort of a standoff. So you have the Lords sitting at one end, the Commons sitting at the other end, and there's sort of little runners going between, so they don't like that bit. and it comes back up, and this is called ping pong. And it's called consideration of Commons amendments or consideration of Lords amendments, and votes are held to say, no, we don't like that Commons amendment, it doesn't fit in. And sometimes ping pong goes on a long time, and I'm trying to think which bill it was. Very, very early in the coalition, they actually had beds in the library, and I left the house at 4:30 in the morning.
No way.
And I remember it was pouring with rain, and I walked out of the front door and got onto the road, and there was some chap with his trousers around his legs, and I thought, you know, I'm going back. And literally I just went back in, hung my coat up and went up to the library, pushed 2 chairs end to end, because I was so tired. I just couldn't face having to deal with all of that.
Yeah.
And that went on, that bill went on through the summer recess, because I can remember having big debates. All the conferences had big debates in September about it. It really was a serious bill. And there is a new bill coming along, because 10 years on, people are thinking that the NHS needs to be configured differently, that the governance needs to be changed, all of those sorts of things, rather than having hospitals and GPs and various bits and pieces. We actually need to work on what's now known as integrated care systems. That's the new flavour of the month. Right. So we have a bill on integrated care systems, which in theory is what we should be doing. We should be actually making sure that local authorities who deliver all the care services are properly plumbed in with the local NHS. You know, it's fine, but the devil will be in the details. So that will be coming along soon.
How do you balance your time, Judith, between having all of that important decision making to do, and being aware of what's going on, if I dare say it, in the real world for all of us?
Well, the real world writes to me whether I want them to or not. so that's fine. I suspect that an awful lot of them who do write aren't necessarily representative is probably the nice way of putting it, but you know, that's fine. And because we don't get paid, we have an allowance, so I get 320 days for every £320 for every day I'm in London. But if I'm not there, I don't get it. So I haven't got a member of staff, right. So I have to manage my own mail. And sometimes when you're discussing something that's really, really important, you get an awful lot. I mean, my spookiest thing was there was a debate about end of life care, whether in fact you should make legislation allowing people effectively to terminate that, to go somewhere within the UK or within England to have their life ended. You know, they just reached the stage, and I understand where it came from. An awful lot of people reached that stage, and the only way out for them is to go to Switzerland, where you can just have that done anyway. And you walk into your office in the morning and the mail is on it's sort of sitting there. And I picked up an envelope, and I would have been 60. And I picked up this envelope and I knew the handwriting straight away. It was from a boyfriend I had in the sixth form.
No way. And
he had become a Catholic priest, and he was writing a letter to me. And what I found was rather spooky as well, is he obviously was following me, but he had found a letter. He wrote this letter saying, whatever you do, please don't support this. So I wrote back to him. So you know how nice it was to receive a letter from you. I don't think that we should do that. If people really feel very strongly about it, then they can hightail it off to Switzerland. I mean, I know that is really glib. It's a really difficult issue, but I don't think the state should enable people taking their own lives. If it's a private healthcare system, that's a different setup altogether. Right. Anyway, so people do write to me, and the other occasion where I got quite involved was somebody wrote to me to say that her daughter, who was in her mid-20s, and it was a very affluent middle-class family, had found herself getting stressed, and so had gone to a therapist. And there is no regulation of therapists, so you can just look up in the yellow pages therapists, and you don't need any to have passed any exams. You don't need anything at all except a brass plate, and that you can mock up a certificate using Word. Yeah. And so I spoke to several of these people, and we had a debate. And what came out of that was quite interesting. A lot of the regulators approached us saying, you know, we'd be quite interested in looking at how this could be regulated. And it takes forever. You know, you just don't say, okay, that's a good idea. You have to go through it stage by stage, and we're still doing that. And it will need some sort of legislation. But people's lives are really, really messed up by sort of saying, oh, I'll see a therapist. And therapists without experience can really mess up the way you think. And if you thought you were in a bad way before, you end up very much worse off, having lost an awful lot of money. Yeah. Because it's not cheap.
So you sort of, you know, you're driven a bit by the correspondence you get as well then.
Yeah.
If it's sort of, you know, does it depend on whether it's your area of interest, or would you pass it on to somebody else? Or
sometimes I pass it on to somebody else. And that one, in fact, I spoke to a friend of mine who was a senior lawyer. He was a silk. He actually knew one of the families concerned, and it turned out that within the house, and predominantly conservative. I mean, I'm not saying that all conservatives are wealthy, but there were a lot of conservative peers whose children had found themselves in similar sort of situations, right. Which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
So that was that. The other one, there was a huge scandal 2 years ago about two things: sodium valproate, which was a drug that you can take to induce abortion, early term abortion, and also vaginal mesh, which is when just gentlemen, just block your ears. If you're in danger of a prolapse, there is a sort of a mesh that can be inserted which supports everything within, and if it's done well, it works fine, and if it doesn't, it leaves you in pain for the rest of your life. And so we took up that cause, and there were quite a lot of debates about that, and a really, really big report. So you find that you make allegiances with people you don't expect to. So sort of really, really high Tory woman, member of the House of Lords, wrote a very, very influential report, which is sort of getting on for 2 centimeters thick. She went all over the country, took evidence from women about both these situations, and legislation was changed as a result of that. So things that happen in the real world can influence legislation.
So just going back to sort of your crossover into the Lords, I've been very lucky because you've invited me there and I've had a look around. Did they give you a map? Because
there's one online.
I've never seen so many corridors with buzzers going off, with television screens in them, where it's just phenomenal. I mean, you know, thank God I'd got you, else I'd still be wandering around.
No, somebody would have stopped you and sort of said, "Excuse me, ma'am, you know, where are you trying to get to? Who are you with?" And if we have a guest, we are not allowed to leave them.
Okay.
So I can't say to you, "You know where you're going now, don't you?" I can do that from central lobby, because that's sort of public territory, and sort of point you in the way out from central lobby. But I can't do it from sort of, say, the cafe in the House of Lords. I'll sort of say, "Okay, nice to see you. I'm off now. You can find your way out, can't you?" But no, once you get your hang, the fact it's built on squares, right the way through, and so the corridors form the boundaries of the squares, and there are offices or chambers or whatever inside them. And I learned quite early that as long as I could find the river or could see the river, then I knew where I could find where to go from there. And sometimes I wasn't very far from where I needed to be, but in order to find it, I had to go to this corridor that was parallel to the river to work back. You know, I suppose after a few weeks, you did know what you're doing.
Yeah. So, so the other thing I was going to ask you is, when I went, and I think Paul's been as well. When I went in, it just looked like the changing rooms of a boys' public school.
Well, I think you've said it all, really, because an awful lot is about
phenomenal.
It was designed by somebody who presumably went to a school like that, you know.
Tom Brown.
You're right. You walk in and there are all these pegs, and one of them has your name on it.
Yeah.
And when you arrived the very first day, the thing that really shook me, I walked through and I went to the desk, and this chap said, "Baroness Jolly." Now, they'd all been sent photographs of nuclears, what time we were arriving, who we were, not who are you. So I was sort of swept up into the process. Go down here, get your photograph taken. Here's your pass. It opens all the doors that you're allowed to go through. And as I say, this friend of mine was also hovering because he was going to show me around too. So it's a process that's been done and works well.
Yeah, because as I was sat there waiting for you, Melvin Bragg walked past, Lord Bragg. So it's just like, I was quite starstruck. It was like, oh my word. So yeah, it's like a world of its own, isn't it?
It really is a world. I mean, there's nowhere else like it. But the Melvin Bragg thing is quite interesting, because I had a message from our whip's office, and that's sort of, it's like the police, but they're lovely. But they make sure that you're in the right place at the right time and you vote. To say Melvin Bragg's trying to get in touch with you. Okay. And it was I suppose 2 or 3 years ago. And Ian, then my husband, sort of said, I've got Melvin Bragg on the phone. So somebody had given him my home number, which was all right, really. And he was at that time Chancellor of Leeds University, which is where I'd gone to university. And he was meant to be hosting a big event for alumni, people who'd gone to university. Every 2 or 3 years, they have a big party at the House of Lords. And it's in the summer and it spills out on the terrace, and as long as it doesn't rain, it's lovely. Otherwise it gets hot and sweaty in a sort of a white plastic tent, a smart white plastic tent, but that's what it is essentially. And so I had to address these individuals, and they, loads of them go to every single one because they just enjoy it. They catch up with people they were at uni with. They will make a weekend of it because it's usually a Thursday, make a weekend of it, go to the theatre, have a meal out, do whatever and catch up. We got 5 minutes.
Yes,
So
I know. I saw that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. So I don't know, is there anything else you would like to ask Paul? Or
so Judith, what would be your what's your best experience in the house, and what's your worst experience so far?
I suppose they're both to do with really old women. I suppose the best experience I had was when I started on this big health bill. When I arrived, they gave me a list of people who would be willing to work in the health team, one of whom was Shirley Williams. And so she was a hero of mine, but I was a bit in awe. And she was amazing, but you had to take her out to, if there was she was taking part in a debate in the evening, you had to take her out beforehand and have a coffee and go through with her the things that you actually wanted her to say, because once she stood up, she just never stopped. I mean, she was a brilliant speaker. I can't do that. I can't speak.
Oh, I don't know. You're doing really well.
Well, whatever. Anyway, so Shirley, I think, was the best. And then the worst, really, was a woman who was a Conservative peer, and she had been a really, really key MP, and she had got dementia. And usually the whip's offices, I mean, it happens because you're there forever. And the whip's offices are usually pretty good at saying, if not to the individual themselves, at least to the family, you know, Baroness this, Lord the other, she really is no longer fitting in, it no longer works. And I had to help her because I was a government whip during the coalition period. I had to help her with her final speech. What I hadn't appreciated, she'd been a great orator, and she dementia had really come quickly. And so somebody had written this speech for her, but because her sight was so poor, she could only have 4 or 5 words on one page. And so I was asked by the chief whip as a favour to sit with this woman and feed her each page as it was coming.
Gosh.
But what was such a shame, your final speech is meant to be a really big one, and Shirley's was brilliant, but she wasn't able to thread the 5 words on one page along with the ones on the next. So she sounded ever so stilted. And it was such a sad way to end. And so, you know, we all said after that, you know, tap me on the shoulder when it's time to go.
So just quickly, because I know that, you know, that half an hour has really gone quickly, and yeah. I was concerned there'd be some quiet.
Fill it.
Yeah, but I should have known. What is it like, sort of at the moment, being very virtual for the House of Lords? Well,
the really big difference is your lack of access to the minister. So from a physical point of view, normally wandering around the house, if you wanted to see your minister, you just catch them when they were leaving the chamber. Can I just have 5 minutes? And that was really, really important. Or can we have a meeting? And the 5 minutes has gone completely. The meeting still happens, but it isn't the same when, you know, the minister, you can see he's sitting in his kitchen. I'm here, the other people are wherever they are, and you can't eyeball a minister. I mean, I can look you in the eyes, but not in that way to make you uncomfortable, or I'm really, really serious about this. Just, I need a proper answer from you.
Yeah.
And everybody misses that. Everybody misses working with people, but I don't think that's peculiar to Parliament. I think everybody everywhere just wants to go back to being normal, to walk in with an office and say, hi guys, how are things?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mind you, do they sit in their pajamas?
I've never done pajamas, but you know, most of us only need worry about our top half, so I've got jeans on at the bottom.
Yeah, you've got no idea. They could be in their leggings or pajamas.
And when this first started, I can remember they were running courses for women on what was important. So you need to wear lipstick, you need to make sure you had something around your neck. If it wasn't something like this, you need a scarf. And people get paid to tell you these things. But it was quite amusing, and you hadn't actually thought about it over much. And there are some people who are not bothered over much how they look. I mean, I'm sure they're clean and I'm sure they brush their hair in the morning, but it isn't something that they bother about. And I think that's quite good, really.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's our time up. Yes, so I'd just like to say thank you ever so much, Judith and Paul, for joining me today. It's been really, really interesting, and
always lovely to hear about Judith's experiences. Such a fascinating insight.
We could probably fill many half hours just going on like this. So thank you ever so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And hope to see you soon.